The STALKER Trilogy came to the Switch a while ago, and it's a great set of open-world-ish survival shooters. It was also a huge barrier for entry with me, as I wasn't expecting the level of, well, what all these games were. But I've greatly enjoyed my time with all three of them and hope STALKER 2 eventually gets a future handheld port. But for now, we're gonna finish off the trilogy. Here is my review of STALKER Call of Pripyat for the Nintendo Switch. This game takes place not long after the events of Shadow of Chernobyl, the original game. Because of the events of that game, stalkers and outsiders alike flood into the zone hoping to loot it, but also for the outside to launch an assault on the zone itself. However, the military recon mission goes horribly wrong, with 5 Stingray helicopters all crashing into the zone. You play as a major of the army to investigate the crash sites and figure out what went wrong. Story-wise, I think the plot of this game is decent, but easily the weakest of the 3 original entries. STALKER's always good lore-wise, with the mystery of what's going on and the reveals that happen later on in the games. While I did enjoy some of the characters of this game, I found the reveal to be really lackluster and just not nearly as good as the others. But I will admit there's some good here, like a few characters from Shadow coming back both in the story and as NPCs, the really nice documentary-style intro that talks about the Chernobyl disaster and what's been happening in the zone ever since, and the game gives you a Fallout New Vegas-esque epilogue when you're done, informing you of how your choices during missions affected each area. When it comes to gameplay, this is a first-person survival shooter with open-world elements. Now, like the previous games, this plays very similar. You explore these big maps and there are bases or NPC hubs you can go to for missions, shops, and just having a safe haven where you don't have to worry about mutants attacking you. Pretty much all of the core features of the previous 2 games are here, with the side quests, upgrades for armor and weapons, guns having accuracy stats, and you can still easily find late game weapons early if you know where to look, like going straight to the burned farmstead and finding the Vintar BC sniper rifle. The biggest changes here are the map and emissions. They've made an entirely new map for this game, and instead of consisting of several smaller regions you load in between, you have 3 large regions in the form of Zeton, Jupiter, and Pripyat. It's nice to be able to go through a lot more of the game without having to load into a new area, though these maps don't have a terribly huge amount of places for you to go. Each one is mostly a few little NPC hubs and a bunch of anomaly fields, meant for you to explore and get artifacts to make you money. The artifact hunting function has also returned from Clear Sky, having you use different scanners to walk around and find artifacts to either equip to yourself for passives or sell for money. And then we have emissions. The events of the first game has led to the zone having emissions happening regularly. You'll occasionally get a notification while you're walking around that an emission is coming, with it also labeling a nearby location as your cover point. You have to get into cover before the emission hits, or it will kill you and you'll instantly get a game over. Now onto main progression and the survival mechanics. A lot of this is pretty much the same as it was before. You lose things like hunger and radiation when you walk through certain areas and need to use resources like rad pills or food to be able to replenish those gauges. Though this game adds a lot more emphasis to hunger, with your stamina usage when sprinting dramatically increasing when you're hungry. Now the best part is they've made it a lot more convenient to manage these gauges. Previous games allowed you to use the D-pad or arrow buttons for medkits and bandages on the fly, but now there are shortcuts for food and anti-radiation pills as well, something that was sorely needed in those prior games. Gunplay is also improved. The accuracy in general feels better than previous games. The sights float around a bit more as you move, and the reload is a tad harsher on the automatic weapons, leaning towards the developers' original intention of making the Stalker gunplay more realistic. Also, close-range weapons work significantly better. Shotguns especially got a huge buff with how easy they are to use and how much damage they do at point-blank range. Now let's get into everything that you do as you walk around. Call of Pripyat is what I like to call the Sandbox Stalker game. While they all have that aspect to them, Call has a lot of side quests for you to go on, and they're much easier and better designed with what they have you do and how. But there are a ton of NPCs literally everywhere that give you side quests, and this is a game that not only gives you a lot of things to do on the side, but almost requires you to do them. To reach the city of Pripyat and go to the last third of the game, you have to spend a ton of money. Not only can you only travel between Zeton and Jupiter via the guide NPC that charges you 1,000 per trip, and that's after you do a side quest to get a discount. But some of the NPCs you can take with you on the mission to reach the city of Pripyat can be expensive. If you want Vano to go with you, you have to pay an extra 2,000 for his debt and then another 5,000 to help him get his protective suit back. Then the game requires you to get one of the better armor suits in the entire game before you're even allowed into that last area, which can cost upward of 30 to 40,000 of the in-game currency. This creates a large grind that you need to do in order to enter that last area. I spent many hours doing side quests and hunting for artifacts before I was finally able to get it and advance the story. The game really pushes the idea that you're meant to do everything and not treat side quests as side quests. Considering there's really no realistic way you'll just be sitting on an extra 40 to 50,000 when you get to that point in the game. Even if you're good at finding artifacts, outside of doing the specific artifact missions, you'd still need at least 20 artifacts to sell to afford the suit alone. Now let's get to pros and cons, at least for me. It's widely accepted in the community that Call of Pripyat has the best gameplay of the original trilogy, and that is 100% true. Roaming the open world feels better with not having to constantly move between areas. The missions can be done in more accessible chunks with how streamlined the quest system is. The shortcuts for items is a lifesaver. The better gunplay makes it not seem as much of a strategic survival shooter, and bleeding has been significantly nerfed. You do get it a lot when you're being shot at, but its effect isn't as severe, and you get a massive surplus of bandages pretty much anywhere you go. The game also weirdly feels very light on combat for a long time. Outside of during side missions, you'll rarely encounter actual humans that fight back against you. Most of the combat you do in Jupiter and Zaton, 2/3 of the game, is just against mutants, dogs, and occasionally the gun-wielding zombies. There are fights you can find, but they're few and far between. You don't really get into them until you get to Pripyat at that 2/3 of the way done with the game point and meet the faction you see there. Granted, it is nice that you don't have to endlessly use bandages throughout the entire game like you did in Clear Sky, but it feels really off to just not have a lot of constant fighting going on. It really makes the zone feel kind of empty as far as who's actually there. Now let's get to content and length. This is about middle ground for when I trek through the game. There's plenty of side content here, but I managed to beat the game in around 20 hours. And a lot of that time was me running around with side quest grinding to buy that protection suit to reach Pripyat, and not using the directional scanner as I should have. So you might be able to shave off a couple hours from that 20 if you are not poor at artifact hunting like I was. Next is presentation, which I think looks fine. It's about the same as Clear Sky. There's a decent amount of detail here and there, and things look smoothed over and nice. Performance has a few hiccups though. Load times can be lengthy. You don't get them as much since there are only 3 maps this time around, but when you do change those maps, it can take upward of a full minute when moving from one region to the next. We've also got some small frame dips here and there, mostly when you get to the end of missions and occasionally when just wandering around the maps, but nowhere near as often as what we got in Clear Sky. The game does glitch from time to time though. I had 2 glitches pop up, one of them wasn't a big deal and the other one was. The bigger one was that the beard NPC in Zaton glitched up on me during the Bloodsucker Lair mission where I couldn't finish dialogue with him as the window would constantly disappear as soon as it opened. This did manage to fix itself after I'd been playing for about an hour or 2 later, but it was very frustrating when it first came up. The other glitch was more of a humorous thing where an enemy in the underground tunnels got stuck behind a door. That's it for performance, so let's move on to battery life. Call of Pripyat gives the original and light models a battery range of about 3 to 4 hours, while the V2 and OLED models get 6 to 8 hours. In conclusion, Call of Pripyat finishes off the original STALKER Trilogy on the Switch, giving us a lot of appreciated improvements, from better gunplay to more shortcuts for rad pills and food. Now, the downside, the story is easily the weakest of the series with a rather lackluster twist. A bit of a grind for that protective suit to get to the 3rd area, and lengthy load times when you do need to swap maps. But it's great with the gameplay and is definitely worth trekking through even if its story isn't quite as good as the others. Reviews to go rates STALKER Call of Pripyat for the Nintendo Switch a 7 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching and have a great day.